Why the UFO question is still unanswered. The right question to ask about UFOs or UAPs is not whether they exist in some vague sense, but what it would actually take to demonstrate that they exist in a meaningful, scientifically serious way. This question quietly reveals why the field has been stalled for more than 70 years. We have stories, reports, footage, and speculation, but very little that forces a conclusion. Tonight I want to talk about what an experiment would have to look like to move the needle, especially with respect to claims about nuclear sites and why our current evidence does not justify conclusions about non-human intelligence, or even about a genuinely unexplainable phenomenon. First, we need to clarify what prove should mean in this context. An experiment does not need to prove the existence of aliens. That is far too high a bar and invites confusion. What it needs to do is one of two things. Either it must demonstrate repeatable, instrumented anomalous phenomena that cannot be reduced to known physics, human technology, or sensor artifacts, or it must demonstrate intelligent agency in a way that excludes natural and human causes. The critical requirements here are repeatability, instrumentation, independence, and public analyzability. Anything short of that remains anecdote, no matter how compelling the story sounds. This clarification immediately explains why so much existing material fails to advance the conversation. There are many things that do not move the needle. Pilot testimony alone does not do it, even when the pilots are experienced and sincere. Radar alone does not do it. Video alone does not do it. Classified evidence accompanied by the phrase, "trust us," does not do it. One-off events do not do it. Appeals to authority do not do it. More Bob Lazar-style claims do not do it. And more data that amounts to "this looked weird" does not do it. We already have mountains of these things, and despite decades of accumulation, they have not resolved the question. So what would move the needle? The lowest bar experiment that could fundamentally change the conversation would involve fixed, open, multi-sensor observatories. These would be deployed in locations with historically high report density, including coastal military airspace, missile fields, test ranges, and space launch corridors. If nuclear sites truly attract UAPs, this is where the claim should be testable. Each site would need a comprehensive sensor suite, optical telescopes in visible and low-light ranges, infrared cameras, both short and long-range radar, radio frequency spectrum analyzers, magnetometers, atmospheric sensors, and GPS synchronized timestamps. Data would be recorded continuously. Raw data would be preserved. Calibration data would be included. Methods would be published. There would be no secrecy and no narrative filtering. If an anomaly appeared, a triggered escalation protocol would activate. All sensors would automatically focus on the target. Secondary sites would cross-check. Data would be logged at maximum resolution. This structure eliminates single sensor artifacts, minimizes human interpretation bias, and prevents after-the-fact reconstruction that fills gaps with imagination. Over time, statistical reproducibility would be the key test. Patterns would need to emerge. Frequencies would need to be calculable. Error rates would need to be quantified. If anomalies persisted after eliminating known aircraft, balloons, drones, birds, satellites, plasma effects, and sensor artifacts, then a real threshold would be crossed. That alone would be a major scientific event, even without invoking non-human intelligence. But to move from anomalous to intelligent, the bar rises significantly. At least one stronger indicator would be required. The most compelling would be information-bearing behavior. If an object responded differently to different stimuli, adapted over time, followed non-random trajectories, or produced patterned electromagnetic light or motion signals, that would be extraordinary. Crucially, such patterns would need to be compressible, non-stochastic, and agreed upon by independent analysts as encoding information. Physics does not do this. Weather does not do this. Intelligence does. Another possibility would be controlled violations of known constraints. Not merely fast movement, but sustained hypersonic speeds without shock signatures, right-angle turns without energy dissipation, acceleration profiles far beyond material limits, or seamless transitions between air, water, and vacuum. These would need to be confirmed simultaneously by radar, infrared, and optical systems with known sensor error modes ruled out. This would imply either radically new physics or radically advanced engineering, both of which would be revolutionary. A third possibility would be predictive presence. If one could say that when a specific event occurs, perhaps involving nuclear activity, a particular anomaly reliably appears within a defined time window, and then demonstrate that repeatedly, that would be extraordinary. This is why the idea of inducing UAPs through nuclear activity is so important. So far, no one has demonstrated this in a controlled, repeatable way. The most decisive, but also the hardest evidence, would be artifact recovery with provenance. That would require a clear chain of custody, isotopic ratios inconsistent with Earth, manufacturing techniques unknown to humans, and replicable testing across independent laboratories. Without provenance, debris means nothing. So why has none of this been done? There are several uncomfortable answers. Real experiments cost money and time. Successful results would threaten existing institutions by embarrassing defense establishments, undermining secrecy regimes, and forcing paradigm shifts. Institutions resist that. It is also possible that the signal is rare or non-existent. If nearly all cases reduce to known causes and the remaining fraction never repeats, then there may be no experiment to succeed. Finally, UFO culture rewards storytelling, not rigor. Claims are amplified, silence is punished, and careful null results do not go viral. That is poison for science. This brings us to epistemology. Our current state is not one of suppressed truth or hidden certainty. It is a state of underdetermination. The evidence we have does not force us to conclude that UAPs are linked to nuclear sites in any causal way. And the leap from that already weak claim to the conclusion that non-human intelligence is involved is far more tenuous still. Epistemic responsibility requires proportioning belief to evidence. Mystery alone does not justify belief. Unexplained does not mean unexplainable. An anomaly does not mean intelligence. The honest bottom line is this: an experiment that would move the needle is imaginable, designable, and technically feasible. But until we see repeatable anomalies, multi-sensor confirmation, public data, and evidence of agency, the rational position remains that we have unexplained data, not evidence of non-human intelligence. If such an experiment ever succeeds, the conversation will change overnight. No press conference required. And until then, skepticism is not cynicism. It is intellectual hygiene.